Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of fiscal policy. We'll be exploring how governments use spending, taxes, and borrowing as powerful tools to influence economic activity and shape public priorities. It's a fascinating area that connects economics with real-world impacts on our communities and daily lives. I'm looking forward to taking you through this important subject. When we talk about fiscal policy, we're referring to the ways the government uses its spending, taxation, and overall budget decisions to impact the economy. This includes influencing things like economic output, employment levels, inflation rates, and even long-term growth prospects. What's important to understand is that fiscal policy is different from monetary policy. While monetary policy deals with adjusting interest rates to steer the economy, fiscal policy works through the government's budget, how much it spends, and taxes. This distinction helps clarify the unique role fiscal policy plays in managing economic conditions. When we talk about why governments use fiscal policy, there are three key reasons to keep in mind. First is economic stabilization. Fiscal policy helps support demand during recessions, making sure the economy doesn't spiral downward. At the same time, it can cool off an overheated economy to maintain balance and avoid inflation. Second, fiscal policy provides funding for essential public goods and services. This means things like education, healthcare, and infrastructure get the financial support they need to keep society running smoothly. Finally, fiscal policy plays a crucial role in promoting fairness. It helps shape the distribution of resources to ensure a more equitable economy, making sure that prosperity is shared more broadly. These 3 points show how fiscal policy is a powerful tool for governments to manage the economy and support their citizens. Here we're looking at 2 main types of fiscal policy: expansionary and contractionary. Expansionary fiscal policy is all about stimulating the economy. This happens when the government increases its spending or cuts taxes, which boosts demand and encourages economic growth. This approach is especially common during recessions or times when economic activity is sluggish. On the other hand, contractionary fiscal policy aims to slow down the economy. It does this by reducing government spending or increasing taxes, which decreases demand and helps cool off an overheated economy. This type of policy is typically used during inflationary periods to prevent the economy from growing too quickly. As you can see, these policies work in opposite directions, but are both crucial tools for managing economic stability. Here we have an overview of the main instruments of fiscal policy, which are essential tools governments use to influence the economy. First, government purchases refer to direct spending by the government on goods and services. This kind of spending boosts demand, which in turn supports business activity and raises household income. Next, transfers are payments like social benefits that go directly to households. These increase income and support consumer spending, even though they don't involve immediate business transactions. Then we have tax changes. Adjusting taxes affects disposable income, which influences how much households and businesses spend overall, impacting total demand. Finally, borrowing occurs when the government finances spending beyond its current revenues. While this allows for additional spending, it also affects interest rates and can have long-term effects on economic activity. Together, these instruments shape fiscal policy and help manage economic stability and growth. Here we have a clear breakdown of how government spending is divided across major public categories. Health takes the largest share at 25%, highlighting its priority in public funding. Infrastructure follows with 20%, reflecting investment in essential services and development. Education receives 18%, which shows a significant commitment to learning and future generations. Defense is allotted 15%, and income support accounts for 12%, both crucial for security and social welfare. Lastly, administration costs make up 10%, covering the operation of government functions. This pie chart gives us a straightforward visual summary of the government's budget priorities. When we look at different types of taxes and their impacts, it's clear they affect both households and firms in distinct ways, which in turn influences overall economic behavior. Starting with personal income taxes, these primarily reduce disposable income for households, which means people have less money to spend. For firms, the impact is more indirect, mostly through reduced consumer demand. The economic result here can be a decrease in consumer spending and even a dampening of incentives for people to work. Moving to payroll taxes, these directly lower take-home pay, again reducing spending power for workers. For firms, payroll taxes raise labor costs, which can lead to fewer hires or lower wages. This scenario can discourage employment and subsequently reduce consumption in the economy. Corporate taxes, on the other hand, do not directly affect household income but hit firms by cutting into the funds available for investment and expansion. The main economic effect is a potential slowdown in business growth due to reduced investment capacity. Finally, consumption taxes increase the prices of goods, which lowers purchasing power for households. Firms face higher costs for goods sold, which can reduce sales. These taxes might cause changes in consumer behavior and can contribute to inflationary pressures. Altogether, understanding how these taxes interact with disposable income and economic choices helps us see the broader picture of fiscal policy impacts on the economy. Here we can see the trends in annual budget balances alongside the cumulative public debt from 2014 to 2023. The line representing the annual budget balance fluctuates between deficits and surpluses. For example, in 2014, there was a significant deficit of $500 million, while 2015 saw a surplus of $200 million. These ups and downs in the budget balance influence the overall public debt. Notice that even when there are deficits, the cumulative public debt does not always increase steadily. It shows some decline in certain years, like 2017 and 2021. This suggests that factors other than the budget balance are also affecting the total debt. Overall, this chart highlights the complex relationship between yearly budget performance and the long-term debt position, emphasizing the importance of maintaining budget surpluses to manage public debt effectively. Here, we see how fiscal policy support changes throughout the different phases of the business cycle. The line chart clearly demonstrates that during expansions, fiscal support tends to start relatively high but gradually decreases. Conversely, during recessions, fiscal support increases as governments intervene more actively to stimulate the economy. This pattern reflects the countercyclical nature of fiscal policy, reducing support when the economy is doing well and ramping it up during downturns to encourage recovery. Notably, fiscal support peaks twice during expansions and recessions, showing the dynamic adjustment of policies in response to changing economic conditions. This visualization underscores the important role fiscal policy plays in smoothing out the fluctuations of the business cycle. Here we're looking at automatic stabilizers, which play a crucial role in smoothing out economic fluctuations without the need for new government actions each time the economy shifts. These include elements like progressive income taxes, where tax rates automatically adjust based on income levels, unemployment insurance, and various safety net programs. During economic downturns, these mechanisms ramp up support by increasing benefits or reducing tax burdens, effectively cushioning the impact on individuals and the broader economy. This is different from discretionary policies, which require deliberate decisions and new legislation to take effect. Essentially, automatic stabilizers provide a timely, built-in response that helps maintain economic stability more efficiently. Here we focus on discretionary fiscal policy, which involves active decisions made by legislative or executive bodies. These decisions could include measures like stimulus packages or tax rebates. However, the process of implementing these policies takes time. It involves debate, careful design, and execution, which can lead to delays. Once these policies are enacted, they can have significant effects on the economy. Their success largely depends on how timely and appropriately they are applied. In other words, discretionary policies can be powerful tools for economic management, but only if the decision-making and implementation are well-timed and carefully considered. On this slide, we're looking at fiscal multipliers and why they matter. The chart here compares the fiscal multipliers across 3 key channels. You can see that direct government spending has the highest multiplier at 1.5, meaning it generates a stronger economic impact per dollar spent. Transfers to households come next, with a multiplier of 1.2, which still reflects a significant boost to the economy. Lastly, tax cuts have the lowest multiplier at 0.8, indicating a more modest effect. Understanding these differences helps policymakers decide which tools might be most effective for stimulating economic growth. The main takeaway is that not all fiscal measures have the same impact, so choosing the right channel is crucial for maximizing the benefits of public spending. Here we see the impact of expansionary fiscal policy on aggregate demand over a 10-year period. The initial aggregate demand level stays constant at 100 throughout, serving as our baseline. After implementing expansionary fiscal measures, we observe a gradual increase in aggregate demand from year 2 onward. By year 7, aggregate demand rises to 130 and then stabilizes, maintaining that higher level through year 10. This steady rise illustrates how fiscal policy can effectively stimulate economic activity over time, boosting overall demand in the economy. The key takeaway is that expansionary fiscal policy doesn't just create a short-term spike. It leads to sustained growth in aggregate demand, which is crucial for long-term economic recovery and expansion. When we talk about fiscal policy and long-run growth, one key concept to understand is growth-enhancing spending. This refers to investments made in areas like education, infrastructure, research, and public health. These kinds of expenditures are crucial because they actually increase the economy's capacity and lead to sustainable improvements in productivity over time. Unlike spending that just boosts short-term demand without building productive capacity, growth-enhancing spending lays the foundation for steady long-term economic advancement. The image here, with its dynamic display of speed and motion, symbolizes how these investments can accelerate progress and drive the economy forward, steadily and sustainably. Here we see a clear relationship between interest rates and private investment levels over different phases of borrowing intensity. As borrowing increases from a low level, interest rates gradually rise from 3% up to a peak of 15% during the economic depression phases. At the same time, private investment steadily declines from an initial index of 100 down to a low of 62 during the Depression with abundant savings. This inverse trend highlights the crowding out effect. As interest rates climb due to heavier borrowing, the cost of capital increases, making it more expensive for private investors to finance projects. Consequently, private investment falls because higher rates crowd out private sector activity. After the peak borrowing and depression phases, we see a slight easing of interest rates alongside a gradual recovery in private investment levels. This suggests that when borrowing intensity decreases and interest rates moderate, private investment begins to rebound, supporting economic recovery. Overall, this chart helps us visualize how borrowing impacts interest rates and, in turn, how rising rates can suppress private investment, a crucial dynamic to understand in economic policy and financial planning. Here we focus on the role of expectations and how they shape private behavior. Households and firms don't just react to current economic policies. They adjust their actions based on what they anticipate will happen with future taxes and government deficits. For example, if people believe that a fiscal policy is temporary, their response might be different than if they think the policy is permanent. Their confidence and beliefs about how long these policies will last significantly influence how effective fiscal measures are. This means that expectations can amplify or diminish the intended impact of government actions. The image of the house alongside euro banknotes symbolizes how these economic decisions are deeply connected to everyday financial realities for both families and businesses. Here we see a line chart illustrating price levels over time, with an additional focus on periods when demand growth exceeded supply capacity. The horizontal axis tracks time quarterly from early 2020 through late 2022, while the vertical axis measures an index level representing price changes. Notice the steady increase in price levels, starting at 100 in January 2020 and rising to 170 by October 2022. The chart also highlights specific corners marked with demand growth surpassing supply capacity, occurring intermittently during this period. These are crucial because when demand outstrips supply, it often puts upward pressure on prices, contributing to inflation. This visualization helps us understand how fiscal policy interacts with these economic forces, influencing inflation trends over time. Here we're looking at the distributional effects and equity of various economic measures. First, the uneven tax burden means that taxes don't affect every household the same way. Low, middle, and high-income groups all face different rates and responsibilities, which can influence their financial well-being differently. Then, targeted transfers are direct payments and benefits specifically designed to support lower-income families, helping to reduce inequality in a meaningful way. Tax credits, especially those aimed at middle and low-income households, increase disposable income and promote greater fairness across the board. Finally, access to public services like education, healthcare, and social programs benefits everyone, but has the most significant positive impact on lower-income households, helping to level the playing field. The image of diverse hands clasped together symbolizes unity and support, reminding us that equitable policies are essential for a cohesive society. Fiscal federalism is all about how different levels of government manage spending and taxation to serve their communities effectively. Starting with the national government, it oversees large-scale spending programs and major tax sources that have an impact across the entire country. This level sets broad fiscal policies that guide the overall economy, providing a framework within which other governments operate. Moving down to the state government, their role is to manage key spending programs and taxes that address regional priorities. They tailor policies to meet the specific economic and social needs of their states, adapting federal guidelines to better suit local circumstances. Finally, local governments focus on spending and taxation related to community services and infrastructure. Their fiscal autonomy determines how quickly and effectively they can respond to local issues, giving them the flexibility to address the unique needs of their residents. Together, these three levels work within a system of fiscal federalism that balances national standards with regional and local flexibility. Here, we're looking at different types of fiscal rules that help maintain budget discipline. First, debt targets set a limit on the total amount of government debt. Their main advantage is promoting long-term fiscal sustainability, but they might require flexibility during economic downturns or emergencies. Next, deficit ceilings cap the annual budget deficit, which helps control short-term imbalances. However, the downside is that they can be too rigid and may restrict necessary stimulus measures during recessions. Lastly, expenditure limits control the growth of government spending. This encourages fiscal discipline, but it can also reduce flexibility when urgent or unforeseen needs arise. Understanding these trade-offs is crucial for balancing fiscal responsibility with economic responsiveness. When we look at recessions and crises, one key lesson is the importance of an urgent fiscal response. During major economic downturns, governments don't just make small routine adjustments. They act quickly and on a much larger scale to stabilize the economy. This swift deployment of fiscal policy is crucial because it provides targeted emergency support exactly when private demand falls sharply. Without this intervention, the economy could suffer much more severe and prolonged damage. So the main takeaway here is that timing and scale in fiscal measures can make all the difference in preventing a deeper economic slump. Here, we're looking at the dual role of public investment in infrastructure. On one hand, spending on infrastructure helps stimulate the economy in the short term by creating demand for materials, labor, and services. On the other hand, these investments build the foundation for long-term productivity and growth. By improving roads, bridges, power systems, broadband, and water networks, we enable the private sector to operate more efficiently and innovate. This combination of immediate economic support and lasting benefits makes infrastructure investment a critical component of sustainable development. The image of the construction site with cranes and ongoing work exemplifies this continuous effort to build and improve our public assets. When we talk about good tax design, the focus is on simplicity and transparency. A well-designed tax system has broad bases and minimal distortions, which helps raise revenue efficiently without overburdening taxpayers. It also makes compliance straightforward and discourages avoidance, creating a fairer environment for everyone. On the other hand, common pitfalls in tax policy arise from complexity and narrow loopholes. These issues drive up compliance costs and ultimately work against revenue goals. They often lead to inefficiencies and encourage tax avoidance, which can undermine the effectiveness of the entire system. Balancing these factors is crucial in designing better tax policies that truly serve their purpose. Here we're looking at some of the key trade-offs, risks, and potential policy mistakes that can arise in fiscal management. First, delayed implementation is a common issue. When fiscal policies take time to show effects, their impact may not align with the urgent needs of the economy. Then there's political gridlock, which happens when disagreements prevent timely fiscal action, limiting how responsive policies can be. Another major risk is debt buildup. Excessive spending, while sometimes necessary, can increase public debt and create long-term financial challenges. Finally, mistargeted spending is a concern because funds that aren't directed properly may fail to stimulate the economy or address the most critical needs. Understanding these challenges helps us appreciate the complexity of designing effective fiscal policies. To wrap up, the key takeaways emphasize three main points. First, fiscal policy plays a crucial role in stabilizing economic fluctuations and supporting sustainable growth, but it needs to be applied effectively to achieve these results. Second, we must recognize that fiscal measures come with trade-offs and limitations. Managing these carefully is essential to avoid unintended negative consequences. Finally, success hinges on well-timed actions, precise targeting, and maintaining sustainable public finances, which together ensure that fiscal policies have a lasting and positive impact. These elements are fundamental to designing effective fiscal strategies.